Hey Tigers, this is the first of many videos made by the CU Suffragettes, a group of women's leadership majors and minors who are determined to educate Clemson students on women's voting history and to implement your civic duty to vote.
100 years ago, in August of 1920, Tennessee became the 36th and final state to ratify the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote in America.
Don't be fooled, this was not an easy process. The women's suffrage movement, meaning the period of time when women were fighting for the right to vote, was a long and painful process for everyone involved. Here is an overview of the women's suffrage movement.
Most supporters of women's rights were introduced to reform efforts through the abolitionist movement of the 1830s, with many of the members of the American Anti-Slavery Society. Abolitionist societies provided women with opportunities to write, speak, and organize on behalf of enslaved peoples and gave them leadership opportunities. Among such prominent female abolitionists were the sisters Angelica and Sarah Grimke, Lucretia Mott, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and the former slave Sojourner Truth, whose anti-woman speech in 1851 garnered her lasting fame. In 1840, when Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton attended the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London, they were introduced into a gallery of men and women from all around the world. Their indignation led them in 1848 to organize the first U.S. Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York.
The Seneca Falls Convention was not the first of its kind in support of women's rights, but suffragists later viewed it as the meeting that launched the women's suffrage movement. For the next 50 years, women's suffrage supporters worked to educate the public on the validity of women's suffrage. Under the leadership of Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and other women's rights pioneers, suffragists circulated the petitions and lobbied Congress to pass a constitutional amendment to enfranchise women.
However, many politicians were unwilling to listen to a disenfranchised group. Thus, over time, women realized that in order to achieve true reform, they needed the right to vote. For these reasons, at the turn of the century, women's suffrage became a mass movement.
In the 20th century, leadership of the suffrage movement passed to two organizations. The first, the National American Woman Suffrage Association, also known as NAWSA, under the leadership of Carrie Chapman Catt, was a moderate organization. The NAWSA undertook campaigns to enfranchise women in individual states and simultaneously lobbied President Woodrow Wilson and Congress to pass a women's suffrage constitutional amendment. In the 1910s, NAWSA's membership numbered in the millions.
The second group, the National Women's Party, under the leadership of Alice Paul, was a more militant organization. The NWP undertook radical actions, including picketing the White House, in order to convince President Wilson and Congress to pass a women's suffrage amendment.
In 1920, due to the combined efforts of the NAWSA and the NWP, the 19th Amendment, enfranchising women, was finally ratified. This victory was the most significant achievement for women in the progressive era and was the largest extension of democratic voting rights in the country. This was achieved through persistence, teamwork, and the power of women.
We're here today as the CU Suffragettes to remind you that the privilege of voting should not be something that's taken lightly. Whether it be for the Clemson undergraduate elections, for city council, or for President of the United States, over the course of the next few videos, we hope to show you the true importance of practicing your civic duty for our democratic process.
We stand.
We stand. We stand.
We stand on the shoulders of the powerful women who have come before us.